Right, folks, we're going to bring you in here just a wee tour under the castle, so if you'd like to follow me up, or actually if you'd like to just yell around here just a second, saves me shouting, as the man says. Big St Johnson voice, as they say. But yes, sir, very welcome here to Donegal Castle this afternoon. It's a great privilege, a great honour to have the O'Donnell Clan Association here, and just special thanks indeed to His Excellency Ambassador Francis M. O'Donnell for organising this and bringing you in here today. And I have to say thank you to Seamus O'Doherty here. So as a Letterkenny man, my mother was from the same area, so he'll be given out if I don't mention him. You know, that sort of way, like they're well sensitive in the Burma thing. But I'll be shot for this. This will be cut out of your video.
Definitely,
Just to
definitely.
give you a very brief introduction, just what you're looking at here. This is obviously the Cashland Donegal, Donegal Castle. It's, you know, by the standards of Irish castles, it's not a hugely old structure. The oldest section here is possibly the 1460s, 1470s. We don't have an exact date for it. And it was built for, as you know, Rua O'Donnell I, Red Hugh O'Donnell I, who reigned as the Rina Tyrconnell, the King of Tyrconnell, for about 46 years. It was a very, very long reign. He was probably the most powerful person in Ireland in his lifetime, certainly here in the province of Ulster. And he built this place as his house, as they say, as his main residence back in the 1460s. And he died here in 1505. And that is the Tower House that you see here behind me. Now that is very possibly built on the site of the old Viking fortress that was on this site. We're not sure, we're not absolutely sure, but we think that this site here originally was fortified by the Vikings, maybe going back 1300 years ago. And they built a wee fortress here, and the locals would have called that fortress Donegal, the fort of the foreigners, or the fort of the strangers, the Donegal. And centuries later, of course, the English anglicised Donegal as Donegal. And as you know, the town here was named after this spot, and later again, our county. When the county was created by the English authorities in 1585, it was named after the town. As you know, this was meant to be the county town. As you know, it ended up in Lifford. In actual fact, the county town has been in Lifford for about 400 years. I think they put it in Lifford because we're beside Asda. I think it was just handy for shopping in Asda. I don't know, but it's been in Lifford, sir, as they say. It's been in Lifford ever since, but it was meant to be down here in Donegal town. They're a bit sore about that now in Donegal town, that it's not here, but
just as an interjection footnote, because you said you mentioned the Vikings.
Aye.
In the letter that His Excellency the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins, has sent us, and you'll all get a copy tomorrow, he explained somewhere that O'Higgin comes from O'Viking. Oh. They were Vikings. Right. Apparently, I never knew that.
That makes a lot of sense.
In a show.
Right, well, there you go.
And then I suppose they might have had something to do with
well, there you go. Look, they're doing that, and that's what they think, because you're very close here. I mean, that's, you don't really see here, but we're on a sort of a rocky outcrop. Jutting out under the River Esk. It's very easy to fortify this area, and we're very near the ancient fording place, which is just over there where the modern bridge is over there now. That's a very ancient fording place here in Donegal town, and of course it's where the River Esk meets the harbour here. So this was a very strategic place for centuries. So we're celebrating the 550th of Donegal town at the minute, but this town, there's probably been a settlement here for much, much longer than that, going back probably around 2,000 years or maybe more. But that's the Tower House here behind me. The O'Donnells built this Tower House here in the 1460s. According to the annals, it was possibly largely remodelled in the 1560s by the O'Donnells. And then, of course, it was largely destroyed during the 9 Years' War in the 1590s, or very near the end of the 9 Years' War, by the other Red Hugh, of course, Rua II, who, like myself, was an East Donegal man. He was born and reared on around what's now the Lagan in East Donegal, and again, he would have spent actually very little time down here. He mainly spent his time in, as I say, in East Donegal, when he wasn't imprisoned in Dublin Castle, as they say, by the English crown. But he did come down here occasionally, because this was the ancestral home here, of course, behind us. Now, there's a change of the guard, of course, in the very early 17th century. Of course, the English seized this castle, just after the 9 Years' War, just in the immediate aftermath actually of the flight of the Earls, when Rory O'Donnell, the first Earl of Tyrconnell, he leaves from Lough Esk actually to head the Rathmullen. And in the aftermath of that, of course, around about 1607, 1608, the English crown come in and they seize the lands and castles of the Gaelic chieftains across Ulster. And a few years later, the English crown launches the plantation of Ulster, that massive colonisation here in the north of the country that goes on for most of the 17th century. And at that time, the castle is taken from the O'Donnells and handed over to an Englishman called Sir Basil Brooke. And it was Brooke who had this manor house built on here. We think that Brooke anglifies the Tower House, kind of in that Jacobean style of architecture. And then he goes all out, possibly in the 1620s, early 1620s, and builds on this manor house that we have here. And the Brookes are not here for very long. They're only here about 60 odd years when they're granted a vastly larger estate in our neighbouring county of Fermanagh, just to the southeast of us. And they go down to Fermanagh. They settle in a place called Ahalun, which means Field of the Blackbirds, Ahalun, and they rename it Brookborough, as you do, rename it after yourself. And they're down there ever since. And as I say, the Brooke family still live down there to this day. And in the 20th century now, they were quite prominent. One of them was the other Basil Brooke, Viscount Brookborough, and he was the Prime Minister over at Stormont for 20 years, from 1943 to 1963. And the other prominent Brooke was Field Marshal Sir Alan Brooke. And of course, there was the celebrations for D-Day there on when was it there? Was it Wednesday or Thursday there? On the 6th of June, and Field Marshal Brooke was one of the main commanders on D-Day, of course, back in 1944. So quite a prominent family in their own way in the 20th century. And as I say, that's why we have the manor house on here. So that's a wee introduction. We'll just bring you into the Great Hall here now, just for a wee quick tour of the actual. You know, because of the status of the O'Donnells, I mean, such a powerful, wealthy family. You know, a lot of very important people in Irish history would have been entertained in this room here. A lot of history would have been made in this room here. I dare say a lot of the, you know, some of the planning of the 9 Years' War very possibly took place in this room here in the 1590s. And indeed, one of the more famous visitors to the castle would have been Sir Henry Sidney. He was actually the English Viceroy of the country, the Lord Deputy of Ireland, back in the 1560s. And he visited this castle at that time. He was very impressed with the castle as well. And I dare say he was probably entertained in this very room here during his visit to the castle. But the way the room's laid out now, obviously, is in that very English style, very Jacobean style, because the Brooke family came in, as you know, when they remodelled the place in that very English style. And again, as many of you would know here, this castle underwent a massive restoration almost 30 years ago, back in the 1990s. This castle was actually a ruin for about 300 years, and in the 1990s, the O.P.W, who runs the castle now, they carried out this restoration that you see here today. So anything that's made out of wood is not original, and that's the floors and the furnishings and the ceiling there, the main roof you'll see on upstairs. All of that was installed during the O.P.W restoration in the early 90s. But what is original here, along with the outer walls, are these three very fine Jacobean windows. Obviously not the glass now, but the window frames. In all likelihood, they've been here since about 1611, 1612, and they were installed for Sir Basil Brooke when he arrived here at the castle. And they're just a very fine example of original Jacobean windows. This window over here now is not original. That bay window is based on the original window that was here. Again, we have photographs of the original window. It disappeared from here maybe in the 1880s, 1890s, around about the year 1900. But that was specially made for the O.P.W by a man called John Kelly from Rosnowla, and it's made out of Mount Charles sandstone, which is a local sandstone. If you know the cathedral there in Letterkenny, that's entirely built out of Mount Charles sandstone, and that's the same there. Mount Charles is, as you know, it's a wee village just out the road there, and as I say, it's famous for the stone that comes from there. Oh yes, sir. Certainly, yeah.
Letterkenny Castle.
Castle, yeah.
The Letterkenny Cathedral. In that sandstone, there is a relief sculpting on a column of St. Patrick putting the cross on the shield of Conn.
That's right.
Which is the origin of the O'Donnell arms. The legend that it was St. Patrick who bestowed the Holy Cross on Prince Conn, who was already a very diligent convert and who actually said he would become a monk. But St. Patrick told him, you can be a lay monk, and that would be good enough. And when he did that, I mean, the legend carried on that this is the origin of our arms. Now, it's actually documented by Jocelyn of Furness in the 11th, 12th century. So the origin of the arms predates Anglo-Norman heraldry, which came in later. But with a later add-on to that cross on the shield is the hand which came in to hold it, which a former chief herald says that's an add-on, possibly by the time of Innie Dubh, the Scottish influence of the MacDonalds, who actually come from Donegal. But the Donegal that they descend from is a son of Somerlet or Somerlet of the Isles, as distinct from Earl. Just a little footnote. If you
oh, no, absolutely. No, that's the columns.
Sketch cross.
I've been granted, but so that's your Mount Charles answer. And again, for anybody here who's not from Donegal, Mount Charles is spelt Mount Charles, but up here we pronounce it as Mount Charles, or Monte Carlo, that's the other nickname for it, but never Mount Charles. They'll lynch you out there if you call it Mount Charles, Mount Charles one. But just over here now we have the star of the show, of course, here in the castle. And again, this is a remnant of the Brook era here in the castle, and this is the Brook fireplace, seen as one of the finest examples of an original Jacobean fireplace, certainly anywhere in Ulster and possibly anywhere in Ireland today. It's been here for probably around 350, 400 years, and it's full of British symbolism. There is no Irish symbolism on this. This is very much, you could say, a piece of propaganda. This is very much to emphasise to you, when you came into this room, that there had been a change of regime here in Ulster after 1611. This area was no longer under Gaelic and Catholic rule, as represented by families like the O'Donnells or the O'Neills or the Maguires. It was now under British and Protestant rule, as represented by the Brooks. And you can see what I mean up here with the fact that there is no O'Donnell emblems on us, there's no harps or shamrocks. Instead, you have the arms up here of Sir Basil Brooke, who came in from Cheshire in the northwest of England. And he was just given this castle around about 1611, 1612 by King James VI and First. And then beside that, you have the arms of his wife, Anne Lester, or Lady Brooke. And again, we think that she may have come from Cheshire as well. And then there's a wee bit of debate now about the rest of the symbolism, because it's so wore away here. Some architectural historians believe that this is the Tudor rose running along here. Now it is very wore away, but that's what some of them say, that this is the Tudor rose representing the Kingdom of England. And then running the whole way down here, and just over there as well, you have the thistle representing, or what they think is the thistle, representing the Kingdom of Scotland. And of course, all of this really symbolises in stone that huge process of colonisation, known as the Plantation of Ulster, had started in 1611 and it goes on for most of the 17th century. And it involved bringing over tens of thousands of British settlers and settling them across this province. And even though this plantation, this colonisation, is organised and ordered by the English Crown, the vast majority of the settlers who come across are Scottish settlers. And they're a very particular type of Scotch settler. They're Lowland Scots Presbyterians. Tens of thousands of these Lowland Scots arrive in the Ulster during the 17th century. And if you can imagine this town here, around about 1611, it would have been absolutely full of these newly arrived Scots settlers who arrived here in the old capital of the O'Donnell Kings. Where I'm from myself, East Donegal in particular was very, very heavily settled by people from Ayrshire, actually, in the southwest of Scotland. And it's kind of affected the way we chat English, of course. We're always saying I and no, and I always say there's no kids in Donegal, but there's millions of weans, you know. All that, it's that Scottish influence that we learned from the Ayrshire folk. But the Brookes were very unusual. They stand out. They're an English family. They're from Cheshire. They're an Anglican family. And hence that affects the style that they remodel the castle in, which is a very English, very Jacobean style. But it's a very fine piece. This, we're very lucky it remains in the castle. It is very wore away because, as you know, the castle had no roof for 300 years. Beyond them trees is the Atlantic Ocean. So it's been battered by wind and rain coming in off the Atlantic for several centuries. But when you factor that in, it does remain in very good nick, and we're very lucky that it remains in the castle to the present day. So we'll make our way on up this staircase. So if you want to have a closer look at the Brook fireplace, feel free. A list of the main men themselves. You've heard a lot about the Brooks on the tour, but this is a list here of the O'Donnell Kings themselves. immensely powerful in the Ireland of their time. As you know, they come to power here in this western part of Ulster round about the year 1200, give or take. Take over from the O'Cannon dynasty, and they pretty much ruled up here for right on up to about 1607, 1608, and you can see there the names of the O'Donnell kings here. Again, probably the best known of them today, as you know, the stars on the show today now will be very much, of course, A. Rua the First. An immensely powerful man. I often feel that he's often kind of forgot about in modern day County Donegal. Red Hugh the First, as I say, had an immensely long reign, 46 years. Even by today's standards, that's a very, very long reign. And he died here at the castle in his 70s in 1505. We don't have a date, an exact date for building this castle, but it probably was in the 1460s, 1470s. And he was a major, major figure in his lifetime. It's no overstatement to say that the English authorities were absolutely terrified of Red Hugh II. They really went out of their way kind of not to antagonise him. Another very famous member of the family, of course, is Manus. Manus O'Donnell, often described as Ireland's greatest Renaissance prince. He was a great man for collecting books and manuscripts and that type of thing. And he commissioned, of course, the Baha Columcille, the life of St Columba, and he spent a huge amount of his life based in the Lifford area, at Lifford Castle, and another castle that would have been nearby. And of course, he was the son of Sir A. And then, of course, you have the real star of the show of the family, of course, is A. Rua II, Red Hugh II. A huge amount of the Irish visitors that we get at this castle come here because of the connection to Red Hugh II. Again, of course, now he actually spent very little of his time of his life here at Donegal Castle. Again, he was an East Donegal man. Undoubtedly one of the most famous people in Irish history. I often think there's something about Red Hugh II that kind of reminds you of Michael Collins in a much later era, in the sense that they were very young men. He was only 20, Red Hugh II, when he becomes the king of Tyrconnell. He's dead by the time he's 30, so he packs an awful lot to a very short life. And as you know, really, his decade is the 1590s. It's the 9 Years' War. This young Tyrconnell prince, who forms an alliance, of course, with Hugh O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone, and they come together and they form this very effective Ulster army, this Ulster alliance that manages to keep the English authorities out of this part of Ireland for another 10 years or so, of course, during the 9 Years' War. And of course, he's famous for, of course, the famous March to Kinsale and the Battle of Kinsale and so on, and heading off to Spain then afterwards to try and raise another army, to try and keep the fight going. And of course, in a more modern era, of course, in the 20th century, you had Walt Disney, who had a huge interest in his life and made the film, of course, The Fight, Prince of Donegal, back in the 1960s, all about the life, of course, of Red Hugh II. I don't know if you've seen The Fight, Prince of Donegal. Now, it's a desperate film, as an answer. I wouldn't be rushing out now to watch it. Nobody in it sounds like me, maybe that's a good thing, but you need subtitles. But as I say, all about Red Hugh II, of course, an amazing figure, of course, in the history of our country. And then just over here, of course, we have the inauguration of the Gaelic chieftains, the Gaelic kings. They didn't really go in for the whole palaver of a coronation, unlike many other areas of Europe. They went for a much more simple but very ancient and straightforward inauguration ceremony. They go to some historic point in their territory. Certainly in the case of the O'Donnells from the time of Red Hugh I, from around about 1460, 1461 onwards. That was usually Doon Rock, up outside Kilmacrennan, north of the county. And they would stand on that rock, of course, where they would be proclaimed Anil O'Neill, or Zach O'Donnell, the king of Tyrconnell. Very ancient ceremony indeed. And that old Gaelic inauguration ceremony continues down to the present day in the form, funny enough, of the British coronation. I'm sure you've seen the coronation of the British king last year at Westminster Abbey. King Charles III, who actually visited this place here, actually back in 2016, and he was crowned seated upon the Stone of Scone. And of course, as you know, the Stone of Scone is the old inauguration stone of the kings of Scotland. It goes back into that old Gaelic tradition of kinging or inaugurating the kings or the chiefs of the name, and that's been incorporated into the modern English and later British coronation.
Is the Stone of Scone?
Aye.
Is the Stone
So the Kings of Scots were inaugurated or crowned on the stone of Scone.
Is it a stone?
It is an actual stone.
Does he sit on it then?
It's on the coronation chair. It's brought down from Edinburgh and they put it on under the coronation
brought
chair.
down or stolen?
And he was crowned
Stolen
on that stone.
from the Scots.
Yes,
I was called cultural appropriation now, or whatever, you know, so that's it. I'm trying not to say nicked, you know. That's
It was said the stone of Scone, or Scones or whatever, was sent out from Tara, and had been originally the coronation stone of the Irish kings, or Lea Foil, which means the stone of destiny, which nowadays seems to be represented by a phallic symbol on the top of the head of Tara. It's like,
that's supposed to have come from there and brought this
in 1250 or thereabouts, there was one famous case of an inauguration of a king of Tyrconnell, Donegal first, who was sure, but then he went to the Cathedral of Raphoe, where he was formerly king as King of Tyrconnell. And that cathedral, I mean what's left of it, is now the Anglican Cathedral of Raphoe, because otherwise the diocese on the Catholic side has been
That's right.
So I was saying this to Archdeacon Venerable David Huss, who was with us, and who is the Archdeacon of Raphoe, that we actually should have an O'Donnell clan and Clans of Ireland emblem on Raphoe Cathedral. That claims it as the inauguration site of an O'Donnell king 800 years ago. Just to add to the history of the place.
And just while everybody's here, because the experts are here, I test my knowledge, but my understanding from the Glacier people is that Bridget was the daughter of Con of Glacier, and Manus came to Glacier to ask for her hand, and he insisted that he would only give it if Manus would make the application in a letter in Latin, because he didn't expect Manus to be able to speak Latin. So Manus nevertheless came back the next day with the letter in Latin, handed it over to Con of Glacier, who handed over Bridget, who got on the horse and rode away with Manus. And of course Manus is considered to be one of the major founding ancestors of all of our lines. But the Glacier people are proud that we contributed Bridget to that relationship.
Very good, very good, very good, very good. Very good.
And the horse, or just
Bridget and the horse, unfortunately. But of course all of the kids from there went to Spain to school and learned to speak Latin.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're just going to move across there, just to your very last stop here. There's a storyboard over there, of course, about the 9 Years' War. We have a storyboard here as well. Time's kind of got ahead of us here, or run away on us, but about the Cathach over there, of course, the great O'Donnell holy book that they would carry before their armies before going into battle. And amazingly, the Cathach still exists. It's down in the it's kept down in the Royal Irish Academy now, down in Dublin there, down in Dawson Street in central Dublin. I think it's supposed to be the oldest Irish book, or the oldest Irish manuscript that's still in existence, as the Cathach. And tradition says that it was written by himself, who's on the painting there, of course, St Columb Kill, or usually known in this county as St Columba. Here and over in Scotland, we nearly always call him St Columba. For some reason in Derry, he's known as St Column. But they'd have to be awkward, hey? But they'd have to be Thran, the Derry ones, hey? But in Donegal, he's usually known as St Columba, and again, tradition says that he wrote the Cathach, and there was the whole, as they say, Barney or argy-bargy about the writing of that book. And as I say, just over here, and of course we have the Annals of the Four Masters, just after the O'Donnells. That was written in the 1630s, so relatively modern times, in this area. And it was Tig O'Clery, who, when he took holy orders, he becomes Brother Michael O'Clery, and he becomes famous to history as Brother Michael O'Clery. And he's was from Kilbarron Castle. He was a kind of Gaelic aristocracy, maybe a lesser strand of aristocracy now from the O'Donnells. They were the O'Clerys of Kilbarron, which is down near Rossnowla, if you know that part of the county, down near Ballyshannon. And he was in the Franciscans. He was living over there in Flanders, having a grand life. And he got orders to come back here to Donegal, which was in the early years of the plantation at that time, to compile a history of this country. And he and three others compiled the famous Annals of the Kingdom of Ireland, or the Annals of the Four Masters. And that's a wee display there about Tig O'Clery, or Brother Michael O'Clery. And just here beside me is just really the last stop that we have here in the tour, and it just shows you just the changes that were made to the castle in the aftermath of the O'Donnell's been here. The Brooke family obviously added an extra floor up there, and you can still see there's fireplaces up there yet. Again, archaeologists believe that that floor was added by the Brooke family, and that would have been all different rooms up there. Where we're standing here now have been all different rooms as well, and so on. And Brooke built on the manor house here, and as I was saying earlier on, the Brookes were here in the 1670s, and then they moved down to Brookborough, which is about an hour's drive or so southeast of here. And when the Brookes moved out of here in the 1670s, we're not exactly sure then what happens to Donegal Castle. It sold on, we know it's sold on now to the Gore family, G-O-R-E, the Gore family, another big Anglo-Irish landowning family. They're mainly based down south, they're mainly based down in the West of Ireland. They have huge estates. I think in 1900, the Gore family had 64,000 acres down in County Mayo, and in the 18th century they become the Earls of Arran, and they're still an Earl of Arran to the present day. But the Gores, they never really based themselves here, and we think that this old royal castle of the O'Donnells falls under ruin in the early 18th century. We're not terribly sure, but round about that time, and it remains a ruin right on up into the 1990s. Now, in 1898, a British, the head of the Gore family, the 5th Earl of Arran, he decides to divest himself of the long ruined O'Donnell Castle, and he hands it over to the local Church of Ireland parish, and they remain the owners of this castle to the present day in 1898. But they didn't really have the money or the funds to look after the castle, so they kind of handed under the care of what was then a British government body called the Office of Public Works, the O.P.W. Now, as people about the town would tell you, the O.P.W. doesn't believe in rushing anything, and it took them a century and a change of regime before they got round to restoring it. But that was in the 1990s. It would become an Irish government body at that stage, and you can see the fruit of our labours here today. This fantastic restoration was carried out between around about 1990 and 1996. Now, it's not a full-scale restoration. Now, not all the rooms were put back. This area was left as an open plan exhibition space devoted to the history, of course, of the O'Donnells and the Four Masters, and of course the Brooke family. But I always think the jewel in the crown of the restoration is that fantastic roof that you see above your heads. I think it was about 8 or 9 men worked on that, and it took them the best part of a year to get that installed. It's all pegged together in traditional fashion, and it's all made out of the finest Irish oak. And it's the same with the floor, as we said, the floor where you're standing, all made out of the finest of Irish oak, and it's all pegged together as well in traditional fashion. And the building was reopened as this heritage site by the O.P.W. in 1996. So folks, really that brings you to the end of your half-hour jaunt through about 1,000 years of doom and gloom, as I always say here, 1,000 years of Donegal history. Again, if anyone has any questions at the very end, you can ask that man there, because